Well, it's a breaking news night on Buckeyes Now on Sports Illustrated that has nothing to do with Ohio State per se, but has everything to do with the major landscape in college football, coaching changes left and right. The latest news after yesterday's shell shocker that Lincoln Riley is packing up in Norman, Oklahoma, heading west to USC. Tonight, Brian Kelly, according to a first report from Pete Thamel at Yahoo Sports, Brian Kelly leaving Notre Dame, who is on the doorstep of the college football playoff this season. He is leaving Notre Dame and heading down to LSU. We'll talk about the ramifications of those decisions, who might be in line to take those jobs, what other dominoes could fall, in what is becoming the wild, wild west in college football offseason coaching moves. Buckeye Breakdown, special edition tonight here on Buckeyes Now. We've got the whole crew together as we cover Ohio State with our instant analysis from Ohio State.
There's something that doesn't feel right.
Unbelievable effort from him today. Is E.J. Liddell going to crack the first team All Big Ten?
I think he can be the guy. I'm not trying to start a quarterback controversy.
He seems to have the durability. He certainly has the toughness, is the question on a lot of people's minds here. Welcome to Buckeye Breakdown. Happy Monday night, everybody. I'm Brendan Gulick along with Brett Hiltbrand. Glad to have you on board here on Buckeye Breakdown. We've got a lot of different things to talk about, but we should certainly start with the breaking news that Brian Kelly is up and leaving Notre Dame in what seems to be, to all of us, to Notre Dame fans, certainly seems to be a stunning turn of events. I have to think that a move like this for someone like Brian Kelly is not made unless it's extremely well calculated. Obviously, the financial, the finances, part of this must make a ton of sense. He must be getting a bunch of cash, but it's got to be about more than that, Brett, because Notre Dame's got a lot of money, and there's no reason that Brian Kelly would just up and leave Notre Dame unless it was about more than the finances. Oh, boy.
Oh, I'm not sure I agree with that.
Really?
I think Brian Kelly would leave for a bigger check in a heartbeat.
Well, no, but don't you think Notre Dame would be willing to match that check, though? I mean,
not necessarily. I would. Well, I guess maybe they. I think they would. Willing and should might be two different conversations there. But I mean, I don't see Brian Kelly as the type of guy that, given a higher paying job elsewhere would maybe turn that down. That being said, it's a shocking move given essentially the success that he's had. And I think in his mind, maybe if there is a reason for leaving that isn't financial, in my mind, the only question out there that possibly exists is he can't answer yes to the question, can I win a national championship at Notre Dame? That's probably the only maybe like quote unquote football, related, reason for why he must think that he needs to go. That he just flat out doesn't think he can win one there. And which is, I mean, I guess no one would maybe know better than him, but at the same time, that seems a little perplexing to me, especially given what we're looking at right now, where Notre Dame might have a shot, given some chaos at the conference championship level.
It's a very real shot that they could win in the playoff this year. I think I'll put it to you this way: I spoke to a coach who used to coach in the SEC, and that coach told me, hey, when we had kids that came and visited us at our campus and had also gone and visited Notre Dame, they came back to us and said, your guys' facilities blow Notre Dame's out of the water. And this was not a top-end SEC program. This was a middle-of-the-road SEC, very competitive, but not necessarily banging on the door for conference championships. And the reality is Notre Dame's facilities are okay. They're not elite. They're not frankly, they're not what LSU's are. LSU does have some of the best facilities in the country. I also have come to understand that Brian Kelly had to do some things that were probably frustrating for him, like monthly dinners with donors, where, he really had his attention pulled away from football and instead was sort of, look, you're the CEO, you're the face of the Notre Dame football program. And there's a lot of things that come with that maybe aren't just X's and O's out in recruiting, coaching football. Another thought around this, LSU, I think LSU it's got the potential to be a great job. I think it's certainly a top 20 job in the country. But I mean, look, man, they just won the national title 2 years ago and they ran their coach out of town. So it feels a little finicky to me, but LSU is the only program in Louisiana that matters. No offense to the Ragin' Cajuns. If there's a kid in state that they want, they'll get him. And for the most part, if there's a kid in the general region that they want, they can really, really get him. And, Notre Dame, I would think that there are unique challenges to coaching a team that has such a national draw. They obviously recruited well. They've obviously had a bunch of success. They've made 2 of the last 3 college football playoffs. They played in one of the BCS national championship games when Brian Kelly was there for 12 years. And he certainly had success there. He's the winningest coach in program history. But I wonder, with the reported $100 million contract they're giving him, and perhaps some of the other stuff that LSU is not going to ask of him that Notre Dame did, maybe that's why he decided, hey, it's time for me to go south.
Yeah, the weather might be better too.
That has something to do with it.
And the food is definitely better. Yeah, I mean, I guess I'm this one caught me flat-footed, I think. And also I think, in some ways, I think there are a handful of college football jobs in the country where the personality of the coach has to kind of fit a specific window that matches that program. And I think in large part, LSU is one of those places. And he does not kind of, to me, doesn't necessarily fit that mold. If you think of who LSU has had over the last several years, right? Les Miles, Ed Ogeron, Saban, 10, 12 years ago, that, we're talking about like big personalities, right? And Brian Kelly's maybe not, right? So that'll be fascinating. That'll be a fascinating dynamic to watch as this goes along. So that'll be fun to watch in my mind. It'll be actually like in kind of like almost like a comedic way. That'll be really fun to watch. Like Brian Kelly at like a crawdad boil, or a crawfish boil, right? Like just like fish out of water in a huge, massively funny way.
Where Ed Orgeron looks like he is one of the guys, because that's who he is. Go Tigers! He's
going from the kind of the cakey or white tablecloth of Notre Dame, to Ragin' Cajun, so to speak, Louisiana football.
Yeah, you wonder how he's going to be received. I mean,
yeah. And that's the other thing too that I think is that'll be fascinating to watch, as well as certainly one of the more, I think, fanatic fan bases in all of college football that were really hoping for a big splash name. And I think, the coach of Notre Dame coming down, if that, was this kind of like nameless, faceless person, I think fits that. But when it's Brian Kelly, it's going to be 50-50. They're going to be, half the fan base is going to be so stoked about it, and the other half's going to be really PO'd.
Sure.
And so that will be absolutely fascinating to watch how everything goes down in Baton Rouge. But I think what maybe in my mind is actually more interesting is this feels a little bit like pulling like the Jenga piece out of like the bottommost level, right? Of like where all of the proverbial dominoes or Jenga pieces, where they might fall. This like kind of upsets the whole apple cart a little bit. And if we thought it was crazy over the last 36 hours, just you wait.
Well, look, I'm seeing a lot of really good comments in here. Certainly a lot of people talking about Marcus Freeman and the connection there with, maybe Ryan Day should jump on the horn. I promise you we're going to get to that. I want to start by talking about what's happened, and then we'll forecast on what could happen.
Wildly speculate. That's my favorite part.
Wildly speculate. That's why Brett's here, folks. This is right up his alley. It's his DNA. Obviously, the other big move here is Lincoln Riley, and it has since gone on Twitter, and you may have seen it. If you haven't, this is wild. It sounds like Lincoln Riley left Oklahoma, and I think just about any human being can understand why, given this. He apparently, his contract's for $110 million. I don't know the number of years, but I'm sure it can't be less than 7 years, and it's probably something close to a 10-year deal. The timeliness, I don't know. But I have read that it's a $110 million contract, that USC is buying both of his two houses in Norman, Oklahoma for $500,000 over asking. So he's basically getting $1 million bonus. And they're buying him a $6 million house in Los Angeles. And he gets unlimited personal use of USC's private jet for family reasons. Seems like pretty good work if you can get it. And for as nice as the gig might be to coach the Sooners, I don't really blame Lincoln Riley for heading west.
Not to mention bailing on the program as it heads into the absolute hellfire that is the SEC. Yeah.
Yep. Yeah. And by the way, if you recruit in your own backyard worth anything that you're being paid, you can be a national contender basically immediately. I mean, USC is a sleeping giant. They're the only team in the Pac-12 that I really feel that way about. I guess if you get the right guy in there, it could, UCLA could be. I don't know if Chip Kelly is going to be able to make that program a national championship contender. Lincoln Riley has proven to be a great recruiter. It's super easy for him to say, hey, look, I've got, a couple of Heisman Trophy winners in 5 years as a head coach. Went to the college football playoff. I mean, the resume for such a short time is really good. And I feel bad for Oklahoma's fans because, the fans don't deserve this, but their football program is, it's still a good program. It's still a good job, but it certainly feels like they have burned to the ground in the matter of a day and a half. They've got their top incoming recruits decommitting, and I would imagine a good chunk of those are probably going to end up going with Lincoln Riley. Spencer Rattler hit the transfer portal today. You kind of figured that was coming. There's a decent chance that OU's football program on Saturday last weekend, when they lost and had Caleb Williams and Spencer Rattler and Lincoln Riley, that within a few days they may all be gone. Like Caleb Williams, if he goes with Lincoln to USC or transfers anywhere else, all of a sudden you have no quarterback and you got to make the right hire at head coach. But yikes, that's tough there. And we'll talk about the future of Oklahoma in a minute too.
Yeah, it kind of echoes what I said yesterday, which at the time felt like maybe one of the more absurd hot takes I've ever had. But now when I said, who would have ever thought that, not super long after the Red River shootout, that Texas would be in a better position than Oklahoma right now, insofar as at least they have foundation at this point. It ain't there right now in Norman, that's for sure. Someone took out the cornerstone and the whole bloody thing fell on top of everyone. And it's not like that is a fix with like a new name, whoever that might be, because that person has to that the cupboard's already bare there a little bit when it comes to, essentially not necessarily what next season might look like, but the year after. And next season doesn't exactly look fantastic, but I think going back to Lincoln's move west, it also not only does this affect him, in a massive financial way and generational wealth and all of that, but it also means that there's some serious like seismic recruiting effects, specifically in my mind at quarterback, that makes that will kind of have every other kind of top tier program in college football on edge. Lincoln Riley's not losing a 5-star Southern California quarterback, folks. Like or even I would even extend that into Arizona, right? Like those guys who are coming out of Phoenix and Tucson area, like those guys are all going to SC because Lincoln Riley can tell those people, look at who I've coached. I can get you to the NFL. I can get you, probably a 1st-round pick. And oh, by the way, I might be able to win you a Heisman. Look who I have coached. And that has not existed, period, point blank, in Southern California since Pete Carroll was there, period, point blank. So the kids that were coming out of Southern California and going to Bama, going to Notre Dame, going to Clemson, going to Ole Miss, that's not happening at the rate at which we've seen over the last decade. The majority of those kids are staying home and playing for Lincoln Riley. And oh, by the way, they can moonwalk through the Pac-12 because the Pac-12 stinks. Yeah. And with the exception of maybe Oregon, which is probably, I would say, one of the more coordinator-dependent programs out there as far as their on-field success is concerned, Chip Kelly's got an uphill battle, and there are a lot of other reasons that he has issues at UCLA, but it's not the same as SC. It just isn't. So it's a massive
tradition
move.
At SC is a big deal for sure. Yeah, for sure. We'll get back on topic here in a second, but this is kind of reverting back to Brian Kelly. Great tweet from Matt Fortuna of The Athletic. You want to talk about collateral damage. Matt Fortuna just tweeted, "This is usually how things go." And I agree with him. I have seen this too. But Brian Kelly has completely ghosted everybody at Notre Dame. I just spoke to one assistant who saw reports on his phone tonight as he was exiting a recruit's home. Quote, "The news broke when I walked out of the house, so I look like a a-hole."
That's Brian Kelly in a nutshell, because he's done that everywhere he's been.
Brian Kelly, a lot of people are sitting there and saying, see, I told you he's not a good guy. And I don't know. I'm not going to attack his character. There are definitely moments that I saw him. I didn't like his coaching style with some of his quarterbacks, early in his Notre Dame years. I think he's maybe tempered back off that a bit. I'll give him credit for changing that. But I've never loved his style, and that's the kind of thing that doesn't help image. But on the other side of the coin, what are you going to say? I mean, seriously, if you're Brian Kelly tonight and this deal's done and you're out, what are you going to say? Is it better to say, "Hey guys, I'm taking this gig," or whatever? You're at a destination job. You are the winningest coach in the history of Notre Dame football. What are you going to say that's going to make any of that better? I can almost understand where he might just say, "Look, everybody found out. That's how social media works. Rip the Band-Aid off and, hope that someday we can let bygones be bygones and go on our merry way." But
I mean, I think nothing is more pathetic than you as a supposed leader of men unable to look those men in the face and say, I'm leaving. That's the weakest ass SHIT I've heard in my life. And quite frankly, he deserves to get absolutely buried for that, if that is the case. And I think ask anybody from the UC days when he bounced, that's exactly how that went down as well.
Yep.
And there are a number of really high profile kids who coming out of the state of Ohio who picked Cincinnati over other schools to go play for the Bearcats, and then got stuck with Butch Jones on the butt end of that. And then essentially were I would say cannon fodder a little bit, and then matriculated into other places. So yeah, I mean, it stinks. I think Brian Kelly has shown us who he is on a character level on a number of occasions, and so this doesn't necessarily surprise me as the, essentially the means of exit from that guy. But it's. On the other kind of aspect about that, specifically with the kind of the recruiting anecdote that you heard from that you mentioned from Matt, that the willingness to recruit from a guy, especially like his age, right? A coach of his age, the willingness to recruit, I think, at times wanes a little bit. Notre Dame doesn't recruit itself in the same way that LSU does. That is, I would say, like a tier one program does. And I don't quite think Notre Dame is in that list. I would say, or in that tier. I think they have to work a little bit harder than maybe they were expecting. And then you add in some of the facility questions that have kind of floated around over the last few years, and it might be a little bit of a quote unquote easier job for him as well.
I mean, obviously these two moves have happened, and they have the reasons. Obviously, the dollar figures have to be an enormous part of it, and so you move on. And now it's time to start thinking about, okay, what's the next domino? How does this impact the rest of college coaching? The Duke job is open. I think it might be interesting to watch Marcus Freeman there. I wouldn't be surprised if Marcus Freeman gets some serious interest from Duke if he wants to be a head coach. I would expect that he's certainly a strong internal candidate at Notre Dame. Are they ready to make Marcus Freeman their head coach? Or does Notre Dame feel a need to have the same level of splash that suddenly this arms race is having around them? Let's start with the Notre Dame front. I think the three biggest names you should watch for in the Notre Dame front, and frankly, early leader in the clubhouse, I don't know if any one of them has a lead. I would be a little surprised if they hired someone other than one of these three guys. Two of them feel fairly obvious. Luke Fickell, who just recently said, hey, I'm staying at Cincinnati. But I think Luke Fickell quietly, like if the Ohio State job was open or if the Notre Dame job is open, like those are a different, those grab his attention a different way. So Luke Fickell. Matt Campbell seems to be a name that pops up in everybody's, coaching searches all the time. A chance for him to come back, closer to home. Matt Campbell's done a tremendous job at a school that has not had nearly the same level of sustained success that you need to win and compete at a national level. But he's done a really good job at Iowa State. But the one name I keep coming back to, I keep thinking about here over the last 20 minutes. I know it might feel like a stretch. I wouldn't be surprised if Urban Meyer comes back to Notre Dame. The reality is things have not gone great for Urban in Jacksonville. Team's not good. I think with all of the other stuff going on around, this year and frankly, some of the issues that he's self-inflicted on the job. The reality is, Brett, like if you're in the NFL, man, you're there because you're trying to win the Super Bowl, right? Like no coach is there because you think you're trying to just keep a job and stay 8-8. Urban's not winning a Super Bowl in Jacksonville. And maybe it's not fair to say that this early. I don't believe he's going to win a Super Bowl in Jacksonville. And the Notre Dame job is a job that he holds in extremely high regard. And I was actually talking to Tommy Zagorski about this before we jumped on. He's feeling a little under the weather, or else he would have joined us. He made a comment that I totally agree with. If you win a national championship at Florida, then you come to Ohio State, realize there was, a gap there. If you come to Ohio State and you win a national championship at Ohio State, and then you go eventually to Notre Dame and you win a national championship at Notre Dame, is there a greater story written in the history of college football? I can't think of one. That seems to be the kind of thing that Urban Meyer would really relish. Now, does he want to come back and coach college football? Does he want to go back and do the recruiting thing that, is a challenge and try to work with, some facilities issues at Notre Dame where they're not going to be what some of the other facilities are nationally? Or does Notre Dame invest in their facilities if they're able to land a coach like Urban Meyer? We'd have to wait and see. But I would be a little surprised if Notre Dame hires somebody other than one of those three guys, with the exception of maybe having Marcus Freeman if they wanted to keep somebody internal. What say you?
I think if you hire Urban Meyer away from Jacksonville, I think we reserve the right to question the motivation for leaving Ohio State in the first place.
Sure.
I think in many ways I mean, goodness gracious, talk about a situation. It's like, kind of going back on everything that he said all along, his reasons for leaving the Buckeyes in the first place was essentially to retire. And that we all knew that wasn't going to happen just because of the way he left Florida and then Ohio State came along. The only reason I think Notre Dame might stay away from him is given the fact that yes, I think it would make a big splash, but I also wonder a little bit that how often are you allowed to lie to people to their faces and get away with it, right? Essentially, like Urban's done it twice now. Again, a third time, are we going to be able to do that? I don't know. I would be really, really surprised if that happened. Not to mention the fact that I think it's a heck of a lot easier in some ways for a guy like him to coach in the NFL than college, but that also depends on who your assistants are. And there are a lot of other reasons, for maybe that being potentially true. You also have to wonder how much he actually just likes being in the NFL. And whether or not, he just feels like he quote unquote fits. But I mean, I think Marcus Freeman is definitely going to get his fair shot there. I think it's fair to potentially question the, how smart it might be to hire someone who has no head coaching experience at a job like Notre Dame. But I think there are certain guys that are built for that. And I would definitely say Marcus is that type of person, personality wise. I met every head coaching opportunity that has come open in the last 3 years. Matt Campbell's been on the top 3 list, and he's managed to stay where he is. So I mean, who knows with that one? I really don't know. I kind of think Oklahoma is probably where I would potentially expect him to end up. But again, we've been saying that for the better part of 4 years now. Luke Fickell seems like the most obvious fit for me. And I would say one that would be kind of universally supported. I don't think Cincinnati fans would necessarily begrudge him for moving on. And
if he does, maybe they welcome Marcus Freeman back. I mean, that could be
that was literally what I was just about to
progression.
say, is that in my mind, the issue with hiring someone other than Marcus Freeman is Marcus Freeman probably doesn't stick around for an extended period of time, just simply because he's probably one of the hottest commodities in college football. I think Brent Venables is another guy that we should probably toss into that list a little bit, but he also kind of seems like the type of guy that would maybe leave, would have to like leave under the blessing of Dabo. And I'm not so sure Dabo would, given kind of the ACC Notre Dame relationship, I'm not so sure Dabo would necessarily want that. And then to me, the name that I think it should be at the top of the list, as far as like guys that I think the world of and who would do an absolute amazing job, is Jeff Hafley. And
he literally today just signed an extension. That would be a pretty tough look.
Yeah, but I mean, it would be. I agree, it would be a tough look, and knowing him,
not even dry.
Knowing him as, and I'm not saying I know him well, but in the handful of times that I've spoken to him, I would be really surprised if that happened on a just kind of like a personality character level. But like his time coaching like a premier college football program is only an NFL team is only a short time away. That clock is ticking, let me tell you. But I think it's certainly, I really just don't see Urban from a PR standpoint. I think that's a nightmare from a Notre Dame perspective. But I think I definitely think it's probably Fickell's job at this point, and it's just his decision. The ball's in his court.
Interesting thought there from Joe. I didn't consider Jason Garrett, but I suppose he is he's on the market at the moment. So
if Urban leaves, Jason Garrett's taking the Jacksonville job. I think.
That could happen too.
Yeah.
The other name that popped into my head that I think he is going to be on the move sooner than later is Joe Moorhead. There are rumors that that's kind of the guy that Akron is closing in on. I feel like Joe Moorhead's a better coach than, becoming the head coach at a Group of 5 school, regardless of the fact that Akron hasn't been good. Man, I thought he got a really raw deal at Mississippi State. I did not agree at all with his firing down there. Everywhere he's been, he's done a good job, including at Oregon as an offensive coordinator. He's a Midwest guy. I believe he's from Pittsburgh. Maybe Joe, if Akron were the team that was kind of closing in on him, maybe he pumps the brakes a little bit and says, wait a second, just hang on a minute. This Notre Dame thing's open. Maybe I'm interested there. Notre Dame would be crazy not to at least talk to him.
I feel like the hot take oven is officially preheated at this point. Joe Moorhead's the best offensive coordinator in college football. That is a guy I know pretty well from my time covering Penn State when he was there. Pittsburgh guy, played in the WPIAL, which is one of the better high school sports conferences in the entire country, the greater Pittsburgh area. That area, by the way, is one of Notre Dame's most hotly recruited spots in the entire country, is that Pittsburgh market. They've taken a ton of 5-star kids from Pittsburgh, away from Pitt, away from Penn State, to go and play in South Bend.
That's funny. I haven't figured out why Pittsburgh's Midwest either.
Well, bro, really, that's a different podcast, dog.
Whole different podcast.
But yeah, I think for sure, I think Joe is definitely a guy that teams should talk to. I think Notre Dame would be a dream job for him. And I think as well, or in that vein, I think he would also be kind of given the time to do it right, because that a guy with both patience and opportunity, I think has a national championship kind of level of coaching talent in him. Yeah, you also have to wonder a little bit about, the health stuff with him. I think, we saw him out for an extended period of time at Oregon where he had to step away to deal with some health stuff. And then Oregon's play suffered because of that. But yeah, I mean, Joe's definitely a guy that I think will get interviewed for sure. And I think he would be in my mind, would be a fantastic hire if they went for him.
I'm seeing a few guys in the comment section talking about Rich Rodriguez. Pretty sure he just signed a deal to be the new head coach at Jacksonville State.
That's correct. Yeah.
Within the last 2 hours or something. That would be wild. I mean, I'm just I'm entertaining hilarious thoughts in my head because apparently there are no rules. The ink is never permanent enough. And maybe it's a podcast for another day on whether or not that's good or okay, even.
I tweeted earlier that said Marvin Lewis to Notre Dame, and my first reaction was that, and then I went, it was like the Alonzo Mourning gif, right? Where it was like, actually, yeah, I can see that.
Yep. Clay Helton, I've seen him in there. Somebody says Coach O is available. I think Coach O is probably going to hang out for a little while. I think he said something to the effect of, I have 17.5 million reasons not to coach for a little bit. He's
going to be terrorizing happy hours in Destin, Florida for the next 2.5-3 years. So
just,
I don't think you're hiring him away into the winter of Indiana anytime soon.
Yeah. Does Bob Stoops come back into the fold? I read earlier today that he was out recruiting tonight. I mean, he's an Oklahoma guy through and through. Is it possible that he could go back there? I guess anything's possible. I don't know if he wants to do that, and jump back into that whole deal, but he's obviously got the pedigree, and that wouldn't be a hard sell to the fan base. And or are there names that we're not giving enough credence to? Sometimes you see an unforeseen guy come up. I mean, look, Ryan Day was not anybody that nationally thought whenever Urban Meyer left the Buckeyes that, who's going to get the Ohio State job? Ryan Day? Somewhere along the way, those things tend to happen. And I know it's a tough last 48 hours here for Buckeye fans, but I mean, Ryan Day's lost one Big Ten game in 3 years, and it's been to the college football playoff several times. He's got a team that is knocking on the door of a national championship, and he may have the Heisman Trophy winner at quarterback this year with a ton of young talent. He's clearly proven that he is able to take the offense and run. So maybe there's a guy out there that we aren't thinking of or haven't considered that
Bill O'Brien. That'd be my most random guy I could think of.
Yeah, I mean those kinds of guys, right?
Yeah. But he's at Alabama now, I believe. So I think he's DC at Alabama now. So that I'm trying to think. I saw someone in our comments say Tony Dungy, and that kind of triggered okay, who's a former NFL coach in college now? Who's the most random guy you can think of? And then Bill O'Brien was how I got there. So shout out to the gentleman or person who said Tony Dungy.
This is an interesting thought, Mario Cristobal. I'm inclined to think that he's probably going to stay at Oregon. Let's think about what really, really matters to recruits these days. They want the branding. They want the flash. They want to play in really cool facilities. They want to have great social media presences. Maybe that's why Notre Dame, wore off on Brian Kelly. And maybe part of the reason why there were some recruits that Notre Dame went after that, ended up not going there. Mm-hmm. Oregon has all that, right? I know it's the West Coast and the national draw for college football is not nearly as strong, not even close to being as strong out on the West Coast as it is east of the Mississippi River. But there are a few programs that probably are the exception to that. And I would say Oregon is one of them. Now, they don't have a huge fan base, but it's practically Nike University. You know, they practically wear a different uniform every game, right? I mean, they have an unbelievable department of creative design engineers and artists for their football team. Like, they put out awesome content on their social channels. That's what matters to these kids. They can do whatever photo shoot they want. Now that name, image, and likeness is a thing, they can monetize all that stuff. As a team, I mean, they don't stink, right? I mean, there's the conversation of, okay, are you good enough to be in the college football playoff? And you stink or you don't, versus are you actually a good football team and you got a chance to compete for conference titles and maybe get to the playoff? And Oregon's in that conversation pretty much every year, right? I mean, Mario Cristobal's done a really good job there. I think there might be a little bit of an edge for him in recruiting, because he is really, really relatable, and he has certainly landed some pretty good recruiting classes at Oregon. So if he leaves Oregon, it has to be for a no-brainer job. And I don't know how many of those are there. Is Notre Dame one of them? Maybe, but you could argue that all the things that Notre Dame doesn't have, Oregon does have. And Oregon plays in a league that if they're good every year, they should win, with the exception of maybe what Lincoln's going to build down at USC. So I don't know if Notre Dame or Oklahoma is a better fit for Mario Cristobal than Oregon.
Yeah, I agree. I also but you could make the argument too that with who SC brought in as their head coach and his ability to recruit and everything, that I think that is directly affects, essentially who you think you can bring to Oregon on a year in and year out basis. Especially, I think it's, in a skill position, with skill position guys and that type of player. Oregon, I think, is like to me is like the biggest mystery in college football, that we always say look at all the facilities, the kids can get all the gear that they want, and like they get, all the Photoshop and all of that. And yet, they're still not good on a national level every single year. And I think that's because there's been some coach turnover there a little bit, but also I think it's just hard to get kids to Eugene, in spite of all of that. Now, I wonder a little bit, if that's still true with NIL and how that might look in Eugene, because I think that's a challenge as well. For those kids to be able to make money, in a market like that, compared to some places that are on Oregon's level at the same time. So yeah, that one's a strange one. I'd be really shocked if he were to leave Oregon for anything other than that type of level job. But I really don't see it as I just don't see Notre Dame just yet. But who knows? Crazier things have happened, as this week is absolutely proving. The last 2 days are absolutely proving.
Yeah. I did see something in here about Kevin Wilson.
No chance.
I
have a better chance of getting the Notre Dame job than Kevin Wilson.
Okay.
No offense to Kevin Wilson.
Slight hyperbole. I don't know, man. I don't know if he's the right guy for that gig, but I'm not ready to just say, Kevin Wilson. I thought Kevin Wilson was a really good head coach. I think he's a very, very smart offensive coordinator. I've really enjoyed the job that he's done at Ohio State, and wouldn't surprise me if he's a head coach again somewhere else. I just don't know if Notre Dame's the right fit. Is Oklahoma the right fit? I don't know. It feels to me like there's this really strong push for like the hot young name in coaching, right? Like everybody's trying to find the next Sean McVay. You know, at the NFL level, it's Sean McVay and Brandon Staley and Cliff Kingsbury. You know, there's several examples of it.
There's like 10 guys. I mean, Kevin Stefanski's on the floor. Yeah, it's that we're talking 7, 8 guys.
And at the college game, isn't it kind of similar, right? Like every time a younger coach has some semblance of success, those coaches tend to get opportunities. How about Sean Lewis at Kent State? I don't think he's getting the Notre Dame job, but the Duke job, maybe.
Yeah.
Wow. Is that really like a wow? You got to have that job? No, Duke football is not a big deal, but it might be a big deal for him. I'd rather coach at Duke than coach at Kent State, and Kent State's an hour for me. I don't have a problem with the Golden Flashes, but I'm objective about it. Why wouldn't you want to coach at a Power 5 school? Of course you would. Look what happened with Jeff Hafley. You brought his name up earlier. Hafley had an unbelievable run at Ohio State briefly as the defensive coordinator, makes his way up into the Northeast, and now he's running his own Power 5 program at Boston College. So I say all that because it feels like the arms race to get the next young hot name in coaching. I wonder how much the Kevin Wilsons of the world feel like there's, I hate to say it this way, but like they probably have thoughts around the, you know, is there still a place for me kind of thing? Because Kevin Wilson's more than halfway through his coaching career. I mean, heck, he's got a kid that plays at Ohio State. I don't think we should immediately write off the value of college coaches that have been around for a long time, that know what they're doing and know how to run a college program, but they don't generate the same buzz in the media that Lincoln Riley or Cliff Kingsbury or Kevin Stefanski, you know, or insert other name here. I mean, Matt Campbell, obviously, comes up all the time. Zach Taylor, there's another good one. Absolutely. Same kind of deal. Dave Aranda, absolutely another one at Baylor. It feels like there's almost this mold we work ourselves into that, like, if you think you got the guy who's 35 years old and you got a great gig, he's going to be there for 40 years. And we found our Nick Saban. And I don't know if it really works that way. Lincoln Riley's the perfect example of why it doesn't work that way. Lincoln Riley has no reason to leave Oklahoma. He could be at Oklahoma for a very long time. And somebody showed him some cash and a better lifestyle and
a PJ,
you know, and a private jet, and bought both of his houses and gave him $1 million bonus and bought him a new house. So see you later. You know, I almost feel like if you're a young coach, man, you got to capitalize on your market when you got it. And that's why maybe somebody like Marcus Freeman could get a job, because he can be one of those new young hot names.
Right. I think that's exactly right. That I think the guys who, you know, kind of experienced, you know, their assistant days, you know, under, you know, kind of like the quote unquote, like old guys, you know, the Lou Holtzes and the Earl Bruces and the, you know, even going as far back as like Schembechler and that, like those guys, you know, the Kevin Wilsons, the Urban Meyers, you know, Sabans, Chip Kellys, you know, Jimbo Fishers, like those guys, you know, who were talking like 50 plus, their ability to get a head coaching job in college football right now is like severely hindered. I just from a PR standpoint, I don't think it makes any sense. And I also think, you know, coaches or programs, I think, are always looking for that like long-term solution, and the push pull that comes with that a little bit is you're probably more likely to get an older guy to stay for an extended period of time, but you have to wonder a little bit with that person's ability to relate to recruits and also their desire to recruit. And I think it just happens that it's a young man's game right now. And I think that's just kind of how it's trending. I think 25 years from now, it might shift, right? 25 years from now, we might be talking about like, oh my gosh, Matt Campbell's on his 5th job. Can you believe it? Or like, wow, Shane Beamer's done a really, really fantastic job when he went back to Virginia Tech, right? Like, or whatever it might be. So, I think these things come in waves a little bit. And right now that 30-something head coach seems to be, kind of the flavor of the month or the trend right now, not just in college football, but at any level of football, really.
Well, a source told me earlier today that the Oklahoma job is going to be filled very quickly, and that it was going to be done almost out of spite because they don't want Lincoln Riley to have the headlines for terribly long. They want that story to just kind of go away. I have read a lot of reports that Brent Venables is in Norman this evening. I don't know if he's the guy, but I was told by someone who would certainly have a pretty good pulse on this that the Oklahoma job is going to be filled very soon.
That makes very little sense to me, by the way. I think a defensive guy, a defensive mind. In the Big 12, it certainly made less sense. But I think with how Oklahoma is going to have to recruit in SEC country, and you're doing it with a guy whose specialty isn't offense, I think that would be a very odd choice in my mind. He'd have to blow me out of the water with the interview if I was the AD there.
Well, look, I mean, if he's a defensive-minded coach, Georgia's the long favorite here to win the SEC, and they're a defensive team. If you get the right quarterback and you have a killer defense, you can compete, right? I mean,
that's like the exception, though, right? Like I think they are certainly the outlier in college football over the last 20 years.
I agree. Yeah, and you got to surround yourself with the right people. No matter who you are as a head coach, you got to have the right staff in place that you feel can, kill it in recruiting and, be the strengths to your weaknesses. It does feel a lot like, the young coaches that are getting these opportunities are predominantly offensive-minded coaches. But is it impossible for a defensive-minded coach to lead a program? No, I don't think it's impossible. All
these people in the comments tell me defenses win championships. That hasn't been the case in 18 years, 20
really
years
hasn't.
in college football.
Yep.
Get out of here. You don't know what you're talking about. Period, point blank, if you think that. Do they contribute? Are they necessary? Absolutely. Yep. But the mantra of defense wins championships is just not true anymore.
No, if you look – I would have to honestly go back and try to figure out the last team that won a national championship that had an elite defense and better than average offense.
It's been a long time.
It doesn't happen. It's an offensive game.
Yeah.
It's an old cliche, but in the rules changes that exist in the game now, and just the way the sport is officiated and coached, you got to be able to score points. I mean, if you don't score 40 points a game at least, you're not winning a national title.
And you're not bringing kids in to do that either.
No,
you have to be flashy. You have to be dynamic on that side. It just doesn't work.
I mean, how fun is it to recruit to a kid? Hey, we pretty regularly win 14-10. Like that's not flashy.
That kid's not coming. No way.
Yeah.
No way.
Yep. So, there's an awful lot of interesting stuff going on around college football right now. I can't remember a 48-hour stretch where my emotions were as all over the place as they've been, from the loss in Ann Arbor to the next day realizing God, this sucks. Covering Ohio State, being as close to the program as I am as a media member, but also as close as the program is in my heart for my whole life. It hurts when all of a sudden your entire season just comes crashing down. It sucks. And for the last 2 decades, Michigan hasn't impeded Ohio State's chances of winning a national title. If Ohio State didn't win it, it was because of someone else's accord. And it usually didn't even come down to the last game of the year. And if it did, Ohio State prevailed. I mean, it just so rarely has happened in the last 2 decades that Michigan has derailed Ohio State's chances. And, it's just the reality of what happened. You lose that game. It was basically the playoff game before the playoffs even started. And so the Buckeyes season is over, and you've got the low of that. And then you're trying to figure out, okay, what's going to happen for Ohio State? How are they going to change this and make this better next year so that this doesn't happen again? Where are these changes most necessary? And, if Marcus Freeman isn't the new head coach at Notre Dame or potentially Cincinnati, if Luke Fickell goes to Notre Dame, does Ryan Day call Marcus Freeman and say, hey, jump in your car, I'll see you in 2 hours. You got a contract waiting on my desk. I don't know. There's a lot of emotion around that, to then watching the last 36 hours between Lincoln Riley and now Brian Kelly and all of the fallout from all of that. This is so truly the Wild West in college football. It's kind of hard to keep up with all of it. And it's fun. And, especially if it doesn't involve your fan base, and you can just sort of, be on top of the mountain looking at all the other stuff happening. It can be enjoyable. But if you're an Oklahoma fan or if you're a Notre Dame fan right now, it's a tough little stretch.
I said yesterday when we were, kind of doing the Michigan, Wake podcast, that this is going to be, in my mind, college football for the foreseeable future, because of the Pandora's box that name, image, and likeness essentially is, right? In that when so there's only kind of like a set amount, if you will, of power in college football. It's not like a number, if you will, but if you think about it in terms of like a number, it is a set number or a set percentage. And, for the longest time, coaches had the overwhelming majority of that. Name, image, and likeness took a significant amount of that power away from coaches, a huge amount, and gave it to players. Now that those levels are a lot more even, you are going to see coaching turnover, the rate of which we've never really anticipated, just simply because these coaches know that they are going to have to do 2 things right away. They have to maximize kind of their Q rating when it's highest. And then as a byproduct of that, they're going to maximize essentially their earning power.
Sure. You got to win now, or else you're not getting another contract.
Right. And the only way to do that is to win and then move on using those wins as leverage to a bigger job and or a bigger contract. And I could, especially given the age of certain coaches right now, like Nick Saban's time at Alabama is shorter than I think we potentially realize. Dabo Swinney's time at Clemson is going to be shorter than we realize. Brian Kelly is not a young man. That there's an older generation of college football coaches that are going to retire essentially in the next 10-ish years. And the turnover from that is going to be absolutely insane. And the shuffling and the musical chairs that's going to create is going to be absolutely insane, the likes of which we haven't seen and never really maybe anticipated. And you can draw a straight line from all of that to a couple months ago when name, image, and likeness became a thing. If we think it's the Wild West now, man, 2-3 years from now, it's going to be absolute chaos, and we're going to love every second of it.
Yeah, it's crazy. It's as much fun right now to be a college football fan as it ever has been. And you're right. The changing landscape, I think, is going to make these coaching moves that much more routine and regular, because if nothing else, there has never been more pressure to win and win now, because if you don't win now, you don't have a window. Somebody else will come in and try to win now, and sometimes it's not even just sometimes it's not even just that simple. Maybe you have an athletic director change and the new AD wants to bring in his new guy, or you have a president or a chancellor that changes and they want to see a change. Maybe you've got the AD support, but you don't have the president or the chancellor support or the donor support. See you bye.
Do you get an NCAA ruling that takes scholarships away? Gone.
Yeah.
Gone.
Yep. I mean, it probably is trending in a direction that sucks for fans because it's hard to watch a team or a program that, can try to build something because it feels like things could crumble so quickly. And I think maybe as an Ohio State fan, that's probably why you feel somewhat comfortable because it's been a 20-year run of incredible success, the likes of which only maybe one or two other teams in the country have even sniffed over that length of time. So maybe you're ahead of the curve. You've got the recent history and the tradition and the facilities and, the name, image, and likeness stuff that you can help offer kids that make you feel like, okay, this thing can keep going no matter what the changing landscape is around everywhere else. But I mean, to your point, Brett, man, if Matt Campbell found out that, if he wasn't the guilty party and Matt Campbell found out that Iowa State was getting hit with some kind of sanction, you don't mean to tell me that he wouldn't be the first train out of town? Like he's got a limited window. He would go take a different job. You have to. So yeah, this is a really, really interesting time in college football for sure.
There is one finger plugging the leaking dam that is like essentially holding back complete chaos in college football from what we have right now. That finger is the one and done rule.
Yeah.
In college football. If some kid who's got a high school kid who's got, a couple $1 million in name and likeness and thinks that he could go to the NFL like that and has the ability to legally challenge that rule and that goes away, oh boy.
Yeah.
Will it be?
Yeah, I mean, we're so close to it, right? We're flirting with that.
It is only, in my mind, it's only a matter of time. It's been about the last guy we had was, obviously Maurice Clarett,
sure.
Like 18 years ago now. So that I want to say he's the last one to do it legally. But it's like if and or when that goes away, we're going to be doing a lot of these podcasts.
Yeah, you're right. It'll be crazy for sure. All right, we'll put a bow on it for the night. Big news tonight: Brian Kelly leaving Notre Dame, reportedly going to LSU. It's not official from either Notre Dame or from LSU, but widely reported now at this point. Pete Thamel from Yahoo Sports, the first one to break that news. Obviously, the Lincoln Riley, move from Oklahoma to USC kind of got this ball rolling, and this was equally as big a shock, perhaps because this one was maybe even more blindsided than the Lincoln Riley move. So we've thrown a lot of names around. I'm of the opinion that some combination of Luke Fickell, Matt Campbell, Urban Meyer, or Marcus Freeman would be the next head coach at Notre Dame. Certainly could be someone else, but I think if I had to place a bet on it, I'm not really a betting kind of guy. I don't do a lot of sports gambling, but by that I mean any. I've literally never placed a sports bet. But if I did, I think one of those four. That's the direction that I'm leaning in that job. And at Oklahoma, look, Matt Campbell could be an Oklahoma candidate for sure. And Brent Venables, I think there is some traction there too, and I expect the Oklahoma job to be filled very soon. So we'll see how that all shakes out. Any final thoughts from you?
Not Charlie Weiss.
Not Charlie Weiss.
No disrespect to Charlie.
All right, fair enough. For Brett Hiltbrand, I'm Brendan Gulick. We'll see you real soon. If you would, please subscribe to our YouTube channel. We love having conversations like this. Great interaction tonight from everybody at home, and would love to have you part of the show. So subscribe to our YouTube channel. Set those notifications so you don't miss any of our content. You can follow us on our social media channels, Buckeyes Now on SI, and read the latest on Ohio State football over on BuckeyesNow.com. Have a good night. We've got the whole crew together as we cover Ohio State with our instant analysis from Ohio State.
There's something that doesn't feel right.
Unbelievable effort from him today. Is E.J. Liddell going to crack the first team All-Big Ten?
I think he can be the guy. I'm not trying to start a quarterback controversy.
He seems to have the durability. He certainly has the toughness. This is the question on a lot of people's minds here. Welcome to Buckeye Breakdown.